Have you ever wondered what you would get if you crossed a school teacher with a vampire hunter? You would get a character that almost always has a plan, rarely curses, but is willing to rip your heart out. The fantasy novel Blood Magic by R.L. Collins has been released on Amazon. Welcome to Blood Magic, the podcast. This is episode number 8. Selina is reading the red leather journal and learning the mystery around her birth mother. May 30th. We've been hiking for a week now and progress has been slow. We are still clearing the paths to the pack's caves. Now it seems someone is trying to sabotage us. In the middle of the night, tools will go missing. At first it was small items, like a canteen or a piece of rope, but now it's more important tools like a hatchet or a machete. Last night one of our workers, a wooby, disappeared. Nobody is seeing or hearing anything unusual. Now we're putting up guards to watch over the camp at night. Some of the natives say it is their boogeyman, the evil ones that want to keep us out. I think there is a more practical explanation, and I'm determined to find out. There was a knock at my door. This time I thought I could say, "Come in." Maxine peeked in around the corner. "Selina, they're doing a news special on you. Come and see." I followed her out of the room, down the stairs to the entertainment room. The back wall was one mammoth plasma screen TV. On the news, they were indeed doing a special on me. I was expecting to hear an update about how I was the next victim of the boyfriend killer. However, I was the one being depicted as a murderer. An unidentified male was murdered at the Culpeper library Friday afternoon. Selina Anderson, who first claimed to have discovered the body, is now the prime suspect. Miss Anderson did not show up to the police station to give her official report of the evening. Now it is believed she is on the run from the police. They reported on the news. "On the run from the police," I gasped. "That is terrible, Selina. What are you going to do?" Maxine asked as she turned to me. "I don't have a life to return to if I don't figure out who murdered that man in the library." I was beginning to feel really anxious. The news continued and they put up my photo. It was my school picture I took just months ago. My neighbors and friends were giving testimonials as to what kind of woman I'd been in life and how much they were shocked by the allegation. Then they zoomed in on my ravaged apartment. Furniture and curtains were torn to shreds and there were bloodstains on the wall. Detectives believed the scene was staged to make believe I was a victim of violence. They used it as further evidence of my guilt. I held my head in my hands. I felt overwhelmed. Then I reasoned that I would work with the guardians to devise a plan to get rid of Marcus. Then I'd find a way to prove my innocence of the library murder. I had to discover who really committed the crime. I refused to live this secret life indefinitely. As the special ended, Devlin and his men trailed in from the side door in the foyer. Many of them were battered and bruised. However, one of them had to be held up between the tallest guardians. It had to be Lincoln. He was in terrible shape. His jeans and t-shirt had slashes that revealed bloody and torn skin beneath. His body looked like it had been used as a chew toy for wild dogs. His face looked like it had been used as a punching bag. Devlin walked to a large oriental rug that took up much of the hall dividing the middle of the house. He turned up a corner to reveal an almost invisible trap door beneath which he promptly lifted by a sunken handle. From my vantage point in the entertainment room, I could see the wide, generous steps descended beneath the house. The guardians could walk side by side and still have room. They disappeared into the floor. "Where does that lead?" Maxine wondered aloud. "I'm going to find out," was my reply as I got up to follow the men. At the entrance I saw that the stairs were made of stone and the walls were concrete with modern lighting. It was not some cliché dungeon motif. I walked down the stairs in my barred flip-flops, trailing my hand along the wall. At the bottom of the stairs I was presented with another hallway, but this one ran longer than the length of the house. Various doors were on the left and right. I decided to follow the voice of the men. I could hear Lincoln groaning and hissing in pain. After passing several doors, I came to a room that looked like a medical office. Lincoln was on an examining table in nothing but his boxers. Devlin and 2 other men were cleaning his wounds. He hissed as the antiseptic bled into his wound. "He needs a transfusion," one man said. He was African American, a dark chocolate with short dreads. He expertly examined Lincoln's legs with white-gloved hands. "You're right, John. He's going to need stitches." "Chow, how long until we're ready to rock and roll?" asked the blonde as he patched more minor wounds. An Asian man that was prepping medical instruments on a tray responded, "Almost ready." He looked up, saw me in the doorway, and then cleared his throat. It must have been the code because everyone stopped what they were doing to turn and stare at me. Suddenly self-conscious, I explained that I was just curious about Lincoln and wanted to see if he was going to be okay. Devlin spoke up first. "Yes, thanks to you we got to him in time, but he's going to be out of commission for a while." He paused and looked around the room, then added, "Come on in. It's time you met the rest of the team." Chow was the Asian in leather, rocking royal purple hair and piercings in ears, lips, and nose. Duncan sounded like a Midwestern boy with his accent and white blonde hair and blue eyes, and jeans and a button-down striped shirt. John was the brunette with steel for eyes. He looked like he was ready to go to the gym in gray track pants and a matching muscle tank. Abe was a very stylish black man, a golden hue. He looked like before the fight he was ready to go to a nightclub and dance the night away. Through the grime and blood, they were all a motley crew, and it was apparent there was no one vampire slayer could have dressed. I found out that the refrigerator was named Gerald, and he was sleeping off the concussion I'd given him upstairs. Devlin, Thomas, and Lincoln made the team a total of 8. I had a feeling that we were severely outnumbered by Marcus's group of villains. "Devlin, we can take care of Lincoln. A little blood and a few stitches, and he should be good to go," Chow said as he hung a bag of O positive on a rack by the table. "Let me know if anything comes up," he said as he turned to me. "Come on, Selina, we have practicing to do." "Practice?" I questioned. "Yes. It might come in handy. I'll feel better knowing I've included you and you are prepared." He led me out of the medical room and deeper under the house. We came to another door. He reached in and flipped on the lights. Inside was a state-of-the-art gym room. There were various types of equipment needed to work out, from treadmills and elliptical machines to barbells and bench presses. Devlin led me to the rear of the gym that was covered in floor mats. He opened a wall cabinet and pulled out something that looked like a helmet and tossed it to me. I looked at it more closely and saw that it was a fencing helmet. "Devlin, I have another problem other than Marcus," I hedged. He continued pulling out protective gear. "And what would that be?" "There was a man murdered in the library the night I met Marcus and you. He tried to warn me that trouble was coming my way. Overall, the day was a little strange. He didn't get into details, then he disappeared, and I found him dead in the restroom." Suddenly, Devlin was more interested. "Tell me everything," he said as he motioned for me to have a seat on the bench by the cabinet. We sat together, and I told him about the day, all the way up to my jumping out of the window to avoid him. When I was finished, he was scratching his chin. "It sounds as if you had 2 warnings that day. One from your teacher friend, and the other from the stranger in the library. I must tell you there are other beings out in the world other than vampires. Some are our friends, and some are not. Without meeting your 2 allies, I couldn't tell you which group they belong to. Once we have the immediate threat to your life gone, I promise to help you solve this puzzle." I was relieved that Devlin offered his help. Who else could I turn to with such vast resources? This mystery had to be solved, sooner rather than later. Devlin stood up and tossed me some sort of chest protector. "We're fencing?" I asked. Devlin grinned at me as he pulled out more defensive gear from the cabinet. "Not exactly, more like swords play," he replied as he also pulled out 2 long wooden poles. "Can't we just shoot them from afar? You need to be skilled in more than just one weapon. You can run out of bullets, but a sword is good if you keep it with you. Go ahead and put on the pads," he encouraged. "But what about you? I noticed there was only 1 set of pads." "I have the vampire blood, remember? I can take a little pounding and bounce back." I humped at that and pulled on the fencer's suit over my clothes. I kicked off the flip-flops. Many of the same rules apply with guns as swords. If you take off the head or go for the heart, they are dead. There are times where we just want to question them, and in that case, we just chop off the arms and legs, he said with a mischievous glint in his eye. "There are times where we just want to question them, and in that case, we just chop off their arms and legs," he said with a mischievous glint in his eye. "They won't die, but they'll be too crippled to fight back." He handed me a wooden pole that felt like it was a good 10 pounds. "Okay, I'll pretend to be a hungry vampire," he continued. "You show me what you've got, and I'll show you a few tricks." And so the lesson in swordplay began. I was learning how to be a vampire hunter. Hours later, Devlin, Abe, and I were in the kitchen having a midnight meal. The kitchen was a chef's dream. It was fully loaded with the latest appliances and accessories with spacious counters. Abe was telling me his story of why he joined the Guardians. His younger sister was viciously murdered in her Atlanta home. She had known her killer and let him in. He slashed her throat and used her blood to literally repaint the walls. After that, his parents shared their secret life in the Congo and the existence of vampires. The doorbell rang. We sat there for a moment looking at one another. Who would stop by at this hour? We filed out of the kitchen to the front door. I wish there was a peephole to look through like my conventional apartment. Instead, Devlin and Abe pulled their guns. I hung back behind them, weaponless, but determined to participate in the greeting. Devlin opened the door cautiously with his gun behind his back. Abe stood with his back next to the door frame and his gun raised skyward. The door was inching forward, and we all waited for something dramatic to happen. There was nothing. Nobody was there except a hat-sized cardboard box. Devlin and Abe stepped out into the porch to look around and walk down the front stairs. Whoever left the box had quickly disappeared. Do vampires use bombs? I asked. No, that's not their style. But there's a first time for everything, Abe responded. Devlin gently picked up the box, brought it into the house. Once on the counter, we looked around for some clue. There was nothing. He began to unfold the edges and open the flaps. I gasped in horror as Cindy's dismembered head stared up at us with sightless eyes. Her face had twisted into a mask of agony. Old bruises and cuts covered her face, and her hair was matted with dried blood. Where her head had been severed was jagged as if it had been ripped off with brute strength. Monsters, I growled. My horror was quickly being replaced by a vengeful anger. They are taunting us, Abe said with confidence. Like, look at us and what we can do. When do we go after them? I asked as I closed the flaps on the box. Devlin and Abe both looked at me. They know where our headquarters is. Where is theirs? D.C., said Devlin. Okay, when do we go to D.C.? Neither one of them replied. You've spent the entire time trying to stay ahead of them and rescuing their would-be victims. Why don't we just pack our guns, swords, flamethrowers, whatever we have, and just take them out? Devlin spoke up first. We don't know exactly where he is in D.C. We have clues, but he's kept his lair well hidden and protected. They easily outnumber us. If we go to D.C., we have to play this smart. Then we could set a trap for him and draw him out, I continued. What sort of trap? Abe said with more enthusiasm. One with bait. Human bait, I suggested. I'll do it, Maxine said from the doorway. We smiled at each other. She can be bait, and will use my visions to see them coming, I finished. That might work, Abe thought aloud. But your visions are new, Devlin countered. So far, you only see things when danger is already there. What if we don't get enough warning? I can practice, explore them more. It may take time, but we've got to do something to get rid of Marcus. I was feeling the excitement of forming a clear path. Tonight they have already struck with Lincoln and Cindy. Hopefully they are done. We could try and see what they are working on now. Yes, Devlin said hesitantly. They did have an early start, and everyone is here for now, so no one is vulnerable. I'll take care of this, Abe said as he took hold of the hat box. Can I help you, Maxine said. I'd like to say a few words, a prayer perhaps. Sure, come along, Abe invited her, and they left the kitchen together. Devlin and I made our way upstairs to the room that we shared. We were sweaty and grimy from the gym workout. Devlin's injuries from the battle early in the night were already healing. I decided to read more of the journal while he was in the shower. June 4th. Last night, I, along with 3 others, stood watch over the camp, and my time was a bit unusual. The first couple of hours were very quiet. Everyone was sleeping peacefully, except for those of us guarding the camp. There was a slight drizzle of rain that ran its way down through the dense canopy. I was stationed by the north entrance of the camp, where we were still clearing a path through the jungle to the Pax flower caves. I was stoking my fire to keep it strong in the moist air when I heard something down the path. It sounded like someone walking through the underbrush and snapping twigs along the way. I wondered if it was our mysterious interloper coming to steal or incite more fear with the natives. I picked up my machete and waited to see who would appear. The steps quieted. Through the haze of the fire smoke, I thought I saw a flash of color in the dark. Curious, I stepped out into the path myself and walked a few yards, careful to stay within the ring of light. "Who's there?" I called out. Nothing but the silence of the night greeted me. I realized even the jungle animals and insects were quiet, as if holding their breath, waiting for what was to come. After a time, I was ready to turn away and go back when I heard a deep, masculine laugh. "Show yourself," I demanded. Out of the shadows stepped a tall, hooded figure, a faint glow of gold coming from beneath the purple hood. "Stop stealing from us," I said, as I gripped the machete tighter. One of my comrades called to me, asking me who I was talking to. I turned for a second to respond, and when I turned back, the figure was gone. It was obvious. Some man is playing tricks on us. There is no boogeyman. The question is, who is it, and why go through so much trouble? Devlin came out of the restroom dressed in a comfortable pair of teal track pants. His bronze muscles rippled with his movements. He had some bruising that looked like they had a week to heal instead of a few hours. He went to the closet and pulled out a fresh set of clothes for me to wear. I grabbed them on my way to take my own shower. I was in and out in 15 minutes, dressed in my own scarlet tracksuit. I was eager to begin exploring and testing my abilities with the visions. Devlin was lounging on the bed completely at ease with his eyes closed and his hands tucked behind his head. I stood at the foot of the bed watching him. I started to feel pangs of nervousness. What did it say about me that I was looking forward to drinking someone else's blood? Why was it that blood triggered the visions? Before I could get lost in my thoughts, Devlin opened his sea-green eyes. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," I breathed. "Well, you have to come closer for this to work," he said as he gave me one of his ferocious smiles. He suddenly reminded me of a jungle cat, sleek and powerful. I walked around the edge of the bed, and he followed me with his eyes. I sat on the edge of the bed facing him, and he sat up in one fluid movement and patted the sienna comforter next to him. The bed was so huge that I had to crawl to the center next to it. I reached the middle and sat back on my knees. Apparently that wasn't close enough for him, because he scooted over until his hips were against my knees. I could smell the rich wild scent that I'd tasted in his blood. I began to anticipate its exotic flavor flowing over my tongue. He pulled out the same sharp blade he had used earlier. "Take whatever you need," he whispered, as he drew the blade across the base of his neck, and then slid his arm around my waist, drawing me in until I was pressed against his chest. The blood flowed from the cut, and I put my hands on his shoulders as I lowered my mouth to drink. I swirled my tongue across the wound and let his life force flow into me. I saw the familiar red glowing eyes. The vampires were clustered together and traveling very quickly like packs of dogs. They were on a clear path heading north of the city. Then things sped up, and they were no longer on the path. They were beneath ground, in an enclosure. The red eyes began to fade away as their real essence came into focus, gradually showing their individual characteristics. I could distinguish between them based on their facial structures. Height, coloring, even the clothing was coming into focus. The enclosure was an underground tunnel, dark and very dry. At the end was a large room full of boxes. The boxes held old things from a past time. The men moved with precision and urgency. There was another vampire waiting to meet them. His back was to them as they came fully into the room. They began speaking. It was hard to understand their speech at first. It was like being underwater and someone was trying to talk to you from up above. However, the more I focused, the more I could figure out what was being said. "So what have you learned?" the waiting vampire warbled. "They seem to be anticipating us more easily. Before we can fully implement our plans," a shorter figure mumbled a response. "Anticipating how?" "Yes, they either outrun us or arrive with plenty of reinforcements," another vampire from the pack explained. "Foresight. They have found the one," he snarled, and turned around angry, revealing lethal fangs. I recognized him immediately. It was Marcus. Thank you for listening Tune in, same time, same place, for more of the adventure of blood magic.